not all that surprising, considering they have tasty chocolate contained inside a colorful outer shell. It's like eating a delicious rainbow, but the success of M&M's goes well beyond the product itself. This candy has been propelled forward by a large company, talented people, incredible timing, and what I would consider to be decades of some of the most effective promotions that have ever been done. So in this video, I want to talk about the history and success of M&M's with a special emphasis on their unique marketing efforts over the years. Now, they are made by a very large company called Mars Incorporated. The roots of it go back more than a century, and over that time, they have grown to be the fourth largest private company in the United States, with an estimated $45 billion in sales each year. Obviously, it doesn't all come from the sale of M&M's. They make other candies like Snickers and Skittles, in addition to dozens of other brands you likely wouldn't even expect, like Wrigley's Gum, Ben's Original Rice, even Pedigree pet food. But M&M's have arguably been the most important product for them, helping establish the business and being a consistent source of revenue on which they've been able to build. Mars Incorporated was started in the early 1900s by a man named Frank Mars. At first, he was just making and selling various candies out of his home, but he slowly scaled up into bigger factories, and by the Great Depression in the 1930s, he had introduced some high-selling candy bars like Snickers and Three Musketeers, in addition to the already existing Milky Way bar, and just like that, he was operating a successful candy company. Here is where the story takes a bit of a twist. During that time, his son Forrest Mars had graduated from Yale University and had come over to help him run the business. They did not get along very well. I don't know the exact inner workings or disputes they were having, but it resulted in somewhat of a separation. Frank would continue operating the company that he had built in the US while granting his son the rights to produce some of his candy bars in foreign markets. So Forrest went over to Europe to start his own candy company. Now, here is what I mean by incredible timing. Forrest happened to be over in Europe at the same time as the Spanish Civil War. Allegedly, he witnessed soldiers carrying these small chocolate balls that were covered in a sugary outer shell to prevent them from melting as they brought them around in the warm weather. I think it was like a light bulb that went off in his head, because at the time, air conditioning was still terribly uncommon, so stores wouldn't carry as much chocolate in the warmer months for fear of it melting. But with this candy coating, the stores could carry it all year long, worry-free, and the customers would appreciate that as well. Though I do want to mention that Smarties were a popular candy with a hard sugary coating that were introduced in the UK right around the same time in 1937. It's hard to say for sure, but maybe Forrest Mars was inspired by Smarties, or maybe they both took different paths from the same source of inspiration. But either way, in the early 1940s, Forrest returned to the US and set up a plant in New Jersey to manufacture M&M's. This is interesting. One of those M's stands for Mars, the last name of Forrest Mars, while the other M stands for Murrie, the last name of Bruce Murrie, who at the time was the son of the president of Hershey's. Very much unexpected, considering Hershey's and Mars at this point have been longtime rivals as two of the biggest candy makers in the US. Notably, in the late 1970s, Hershey's introduced a bunch of new products, including Reese's Pieces, kind of their peanut butter version of the M&M. In the following years, Mars answered back by coming out with their own products like Skittles and Twix. Then, in 1982, when M&M's passed on the chance of being featured in the movie E.T., Hershey's jumped at the opportunity to have their new product featured, and it reportedly helped sales quite a bit. Later in that decade, Hershey's was helped even further when they acquired the candies Almond Joy and Mounds, but then in 1990, Mars answered back when they introduced peanut butter M&M's to compete with Reese's. Overall, they have been very competitive, so it is interesting to think that M&M's sort of started as a collaboration between Mars and Hershey's, literally being made with Hershey's chocolate. See, Forrest Mars was looking to introduce M&M's in 1941. World War II was being fought over in Europe, and it seemed likely that the US would soon become involved. He figured that that would mean rations on sugar and chocolate, and that would make it difficult for him to make the M&M's. His idea was to team up with Hershey's to make sure that he would consistently have the ingredients he needed to make his new product and get it out there. That initial deal was to give Bruce Murrie a 20% stake in the company, but Forrest bought that 20% right back from him after the war was over. And again, that's the amazing timing I was talking about. The US entered World War II just months after he sold his first M&M's, and during the war, all of his production was focused toward the war efforts. They were taken off the shelves and sold exclusively to soldiers because they were so practical to carry around. Once the war ended and they were sold to the public again, so many of the returning soldiers were already fans and continued buying them. From there, M&M's continued growing in popularity, and by 1964, Forrest merged his company with his father's original Mars Mars company, both of them very large at that point, and that's how Mars Incorporated has been operating ever since. Alright, there is so much to talk about when it comes to M&Ms, but for the rest of this video, I want to focus on the advertising, because even though some of it has been controversial lately, overall it has been so effective. In 1948, they started selling M&Ms in that signature brown bag instead of a tube, but when they introduced the mini version about 50 years later, those were again sold in a tube. By 1950, the candy had become so popular that there were imitators, other companies trying to cash in by selling a similar version, which can be a big concern. Many companies have struggled or even failed because of similar issues. The solution here was to stamp each candy with an M. Originally, the M was in black, but they made it white 4 years later, and obviously, that is what they have been doing ever since. Just think about that. M&Ms have been so aggressive with their branding that they literally brand every little piece of candy. They even introduced a new slogan to bring awareness to it, telling consumers that they should look for the M on every piece. In 1954, peanut M&Ms were launched, or as I call them, the best kind of M&M. Seriously, if you're not allergic, my advice is to go straight to that yellow bag. It was their first new product offering beyond the original and was introduced with a big new marketing campaign. The company had hired an ad agency called Bates, and they came up with the now famous slogan, "Melts in your mouth, not in your hand." I'm sure we've all heard it before, and for good reason. It's great. It's a simple way to express the unique benefits of the candy. And as if that wasn't enough, during the same campaign, in the very same commercial, they also introduced the M&M's characters, or as they're officially called today, spokes candies. Yeah, that was their way of showing everyone the difference from the original candy and the newly introduced peanut version. Over the following decades, they were always looking for innovative ways to promote M&M's. It is a unique candy, so that opened up some unique opportunities. In the 1960s, when Starburst were first introduced to the US market, they were labeled with M&M's branding. In 1981, they famously became the first candy in space. In 1984, they paid $5 million to become the official snack food of the Olympics, which were held in Los Angeles. In 1995, they were looking to replace the tan M&M with a new color, but instead of choosing that new color internally, like almost any other company would have likely done, they turned it into a promotional opportunity. It was this big election where the public had to vote if it should be pink, purple, or blue. In the end, it was blue that received over 5 million of the 10 million votes that were cast. The Empire State Building was lit up in blue, and there was a big commercial campaign to announce the winner. Honestly, as big as the election was, I would say that commercial campaign was actually the most impactful part of all of it. Consider that Mars Incorporated had been working with that same ad agency since the 1950s, so for about 40 years or so, they were the main ones behind all of the famous slogans and characters and commercials for M&Ms. But in 1995, in search of a new image, Mars reassigned an estimated $400 million toward new ad agencies, the primary one being BBDO. I want to bring the attention back to the spokes candies, not just because I love saying that word, but because during their first 40 years of existence, there was not much evolution. Seriously, look at any commercial featuring the M&M characters during that time. They were all very sweet and friendly, without anything separating one color from the others. I mean, sure, there was a thing where the red one was plain, while the yellow one was the bigger peanut kind, but as far as personality, pretty much indistinguishable.
Who's made of delicious milk chocolate? We are, sir. I can't hear you.
All of that changed in 1995. The new agency took inspiration from the traditional format of sitcoms, where the cast of characters would all have very different personality traits, starting with the red and yellow ones, but slowly introducing new characters over the years as new products came out, or if it appeared that the brand needed a boost in awareness. If you're familiar with the show The Flintstones, you'll probably see how characters like Fred and Barney helped influence the personalities of red and yellow. All of these ideas were happening, by the way, just as America was voting for blue to become the next new M&M, so logically, blue was the next new character to be introduced. He was like the worry-free, cool character. They even made a series of funny commercials where red and yellow were painting themselves or holding their breath so that they could become the new spokes candies for the blue M&M. Only 2 years later, they introduced the green M&M character. It had always been a big rumor that the green M&M was somehow an aphrodisiac, so they created green to be a seductive female character. After only another 2 years, orange was introduced as the crispy M&M to promote their new product, but he has since been reassigned to promote the pretzel variety. Orange is pretty funny because he's always nervous that somebody's going to eat him. Then, 13 years went by before Ms. Brown was introduced in 2012. She's kind of like the intellectual, sophisticated type. I mean, she is wearing glasses after all. Finally, purple was introduced in 2022, designed to represent acceptance and inclusivity. A little tangent about purple. She was never a spokes candy before, but the purple M&M itself seems to keep coming and going. It was one of the original colors until it was replaced by tan in 1949. Then, when they went to replace tan in 1995, purple lost the vote against blue, but then in 2002 there was another vote that purple actually won, but it didn't stay for long. And now here we are again with purple back in the mix, seemingly in a bigger way because of the character, so maybe it is here to stay this time. I do have to mention that these spokes candies have been so controversial lately. It's really not the focus of this video, so I don't want to go too deep into it, but in short, in early 2022, they were given updated looks. Most notably, green was redesigned with a less seductive appearance, wearing sneakers instead of boots. There was backlash there. The introduction of purple as the first female peanut M&M had its own backlash. Then, in early 2023, they announced that the spokes candies would be leaving indefinitely and replaced by comedian Maya Rudolph, which was pretty much just a marketing gimmick, attempting to capitalize on all the conversation that they were already generating. They made their big return in a Super Bowl commercial, seemingly here to stay. I mean, they've been one of the biggest promoters of the brand for almost 70 years now, so yeah, I don't know. I am only giving the highlights here, so I highly recommend you look further into the controversies yourself, but wherever you stand on the issue, you have to admit that it has all been bringing further awareness to the M&M's brand. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about M&M's? How do you rank them among the other popular candies, and what is your favorite kind? Again, in my opinion, it is hard to do better than that peanut one, but maybe you can convince me otherwise. What do you think of all these marketing tactics over the years? What do you think of the characters themselves? What do you think are some of the biggest reasons behind the success of the candy? And any other thoughts you have about M&M's, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.